Yes, I have loved you with an everlasting love, an everlasting love, an everlasting love. Therefore, with loving kindness have I drawn you, drawn you, drawn you.
Hello.
Hi, this is episode 30. And this is the beginning of a series called LGBTQIA+. And this is only part one of this series, and it's called Preparing for Pride Month. So, we're going to talk a lot. We're going to do a series about trying to cover many of the topics that we promised to deal with regarding the LGBTQIA+ community. First of all, I want Chastity to review the meaning of all the letters in this acronym. Now, I only used part of them. Otherwise, it takes forever just to say them all, and that's why people call them the alphabet people. But, you know, I think if Chastity reviews, she's done this before, but it takes some review to get used to what all these letters symbolize.
Yeah, and each time I explain it, I get better at it.
Good.
Now, I'm explaining the acronym, but I'm not responsible for this mess. I didn't invent it. I just know what the words mean in general.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, having both L and G is a little bit redundant in my opinion, because in modern times, both men and women who are gay attracted to the same sex. They're both gay,
Yeah.
but lesbian is a separate term for women specifically. So they
Yeah.
refer to them as lesbians, whereas they tend to refer to gay men as gay. But I feel like we could have just called everybody gay and had one less letter. But we'll let the women have their own letter.
Okay.
You know,
Thank you, I guess, even though I'm not one of those.
Right.
But still,
right.
appreciate you thinking of the women.
Yeah. I mean, they can have a letter. Let's be generous. But I'm just saying, I'm not responsible for the acronym. And then the bisexuals or biromantics tend to be people who are attracted to both men and women. Like they can go either way in their terms of, you know, their romantic partner, their future spouse, or whatever.
Right.
So some people are like that, where it doesn't matter very much. And then this is where a lot of people get tripped up, is because usually people don't refer to the whole acronym, they just say LGBT. And T is different than L, G, and B. Because even though historically there's a reason why it's part of the acronym, but it's not the same as L, G, and B, because those are about who somebody's attracted to. It's about other people, their preference. But transgender, which is me, for example, is more about your sense of identity and when you don't fit into your assigned gender role that society makes you. And it's not really so much about the body as it is the soul, and it's about the role society forces on you. Sort of like, well, women have to be silent in the churches and they're not allowed to talk, for example. You know, these ideas that, you know, men do these things and women do these things. And a lot of people, especially non-binary people, who fit under the transgender umbrella but are not trying to conform to a specific gender, we just want to be people. And the most important thing you need to know about transgender people is that we're just people. Don't think of us as a gender, as a man or woman, but just think of us as a person, just like you, that needs to be treated equal. And a lot of people, they just really, they get all tripped up over transgender because they conflate sex with gender. they think, well, you're either this. You either have this part or this part. You're either male or female.
One or the other. Yeah, that's
And
what people think.
and first of all, it's a mistake in thinking in two ways. First of all, because they are confusing gender identity with biological sex, which is a separate thing.
Yeah.
Usually they go together, but not always. Second of all, scientifically, it's not true. The fact is, we have chromosome abnormalities, we have intersex conditions, we have true hermaphrodites who are born with both male and female
now
parts.
that's the next one, which is I, which stands for intersex.
Yeah.
But I was going to add that, just like you're saying that trans people just want to be treated like people,
Yes.
that's the same way that intersex people feel.
Yeah.
Because people are so determined to know whether they're male or female. And the thing is, they're both.
Exactly.
They're both or neither, because they've had a combination of things going on in their body and their chromosomes that have caused them to be not just male or not just female. And so, and they do exist, and we can't ignore them, and they go through a lot because society expects them to be one or the other and gets weird with them if they aren't.
Exactly. Because technically, yeah, because LGBTQIA. See, the way I think of it is, I feel like the T and I should have been next to each other, because transgender and intersex are related. They're not always the same thing, but I personally believe that a lot of transgender people are really intersex, but they don't know it.
Yeah, and intersex people feel the same way. Why can't you just accept me as a person?
Yeah.
Because that's all they're able to be, is a person. They can't identify their own gender one way or the other, because they were born with certain things that would be considered abnormalities, but that doesn't make them any less of a person. Now, I skipped over the Q.
Yes.
So I'm going to let you explain
Now,
that.
some people say the Q is for queer. Other people say it's for questioning. And the thing is, queer traditionally was a synonym for gay. But it was also used as a slur, where they would call somebody a queer, like, oh, that's a
Because you're
gay.
strange kind of queer.
Yeah, because queer literally just means that you're weird. You know,
Weird or strange, yeah.
You know, and yes, we are, but
We're all queer, though. I mean, all humans are
in
queer
our own way.
In their own way, that's true.
Yeah. Now, some people prefer not to use it because it's been used as a slur against us, like a bad word.
It has a bad connotation.
But personally, I like the word because I am weird, and because it's only one letter off from Queen, which is a chess piece.
That's one way to look at it.
That's my positive way of looking at it.
Okay.
And then the A, some people say it stands for ally, but more appropriately, it's really asexual. The asexual and the aromantic people, which I feel like it fits more within the category of the LG and B, because it refers to your sexual or romantic orientation. Some people are just not attracted to anyone. They're not really interested in somebody as a sexual.
Not in a sexual way.
Yeah.
I mean, you might be attracted to somebody because they have the same interests as you. Or
Right.
whatever.
I might be interested in playing chess with them. I might do that.
Yeah.
But for as far as see, I'm asexual, and so I'm not sexually attracted to people. There's people that I like and I want to have them as friends, but it's a foreign concept to many people who misunderstand, because that, first of all, the society places so much importance on sex, and that they think that's what it's all about.
Exactly.
And they think mistakenly that being LGB, lesbian, gay, or bisexual, they think that describes who somebody's having sex with and what they're doing, and it doesn't. Because you can be lesbian, gay, bisexual, or heterosexual, straight, like most people are, but that doesn't mean you are actually having sex with someone.
Right, because it's more the way we're attracted based on our chromosomes and hormones in our body causes us to be attracted to somebody in that way. But that doesn't mean you're not.
Right.
You know, if you're asexual, you're not sexually attracted to anybody, but that doesn't mean you're not a person.
Right.
It has basic other needs than sex.
Exactly. And so it's just important to remember that you can't assume what a person is doing sexually. Plus, it's none of your business anyway.
Well, yeah, I'll go with that.
There's that, but it's just important to recognize that these people exist that are of different orientations, and a lot of people don't believe that asexuals exist because they think, well, if you're not sexual about somebody, well, you must have a hormonal imbalance. And most of the time, maybe that we probably do. Some of us may have intersex conditions, such as if you are such a hybrid combination of chromosomes and your hormone levels to where you're equally estrogen and testosterone, that right there could have you having mixed feelings to where you might feel non-binary, or you may not. Your hormones may be sending you mixed signals, like, should I be attracted to men or should I be attracted to women? Like, you really don't know because your brain and your hormones, like, it's sending you different signals at different times.
Yeah.
And so,
then if you hear messages that you're bad if you have certain tendencies or attractions, then that makes you afraid to even face what might be going on with you.
yeah, and another thing that I think is interesting, though, one thing about asexuals that I think is unique is that because a lot of religions place an emphasis on celibacy and abstinence and waiting till you're married to have sex or taking a vow of celibacy, as Catholics do and some other religions do, even the Jains do. What tends to happen with asexual people is a lot of us tend to become very religious because it's just easier. Like, it's easier for these people to become a nun or a monk or a priest,
Yeah.
just because they naturally are not interested in that, so they pursue other things instead. So in that way, maybe that's a gift of singleness that God has given them. Just saying.
Yeah, and we talked about that some when we talked about different types of eunuchs that the Bible refers to, that some are just that way because they have a special gift to be that way.
Yep.
And they maybe want to use that for the kingdom of God's sake because they're not distracted by other things.
Yeah, and then the plus was added to the acronym, and I consider it the final piece because even though these other letters cover a lot of cases, there's going to be people who are going to arise new situations, new identities, and instead of just keep making an infinitely long list of letters, they just added the plus, meaning like, well, and plus whatever else there is, basically.
Right.
Because some people are still not going to feel that any of these things represent them. But words are important because these words enable you, when you're searching on the internet or you're trying to find other people who use similar words to you, helps you find other people like you, and finding friends, finding books, finding whatever resources help you understand yourself and why you feel the way you do is important. That's why knowing these letters and the words they represent is important to know.
And it's important for finding support groups because one thing, intersex people have a hard time finding others. And they think that they're the only ones that go through this. And that some of them have been able to find online support groups of other intersex people. And they've been able to get a lot of help, and then they get together. Some of them travel to another country just so they can all get together and talk and share. So they feel accepted in a different group than the average society who keeps judging them because they don't look whether they're one or the other, and they're like, well, what are you? Like you have to be male or female or you're just a nothing.
Yeah, which is kind of dismissing the fact that people are people and they're beyond just that.
And they just want to be known as people and loved as people.
Yep.
Because we all need to be loved, and if you're going to say, well, you've got to be one or the other, or I don't want anything to do with you, well, then you got a bad attitude.
Yep. And I wanted to mention, too, how this came about, because I find this interesting, because I think it was Tuesday morning when I got off of work, one of the managers at Walmart, who's sort of like an activities person. When there's holidays and stuff, they're kind of responsible for setting up events and stuff. And so she asked me, she said, if I had any ideas of what we can do for Pride Month, to let her know, because she had me participate a little bit last year, because she's already thinking ahead, because, it's almost May, June's coming, which is Pride Month, and she mentioned that, and I talked with her about some of that on Tuesday morning when I got off work, and then just a few days later, you told me that God told you that we're supposed to do a series, podcasts about Pride Month and LGBT issues, and I'm like, interesting, because I was already feeling that same way. I had it on my mind already, and then when she mentioned it, that manager at Walmart, and I thought, well, this is perfect, because I do have a lot to share. I have a lot of thoughts. And I want to refine my communication to be able to explain these things to people, because I may end up even trying to explain things to people at work. I want to, because particularly I want to be able to explain the unique situations that arise for transgender people in the workplace, and how sometimes things can go better or worse depending on how people handle situations.
Right.
So I probably will be educating them, but this podcast series, we're going to be talking about these issues. We're going to be talking about how this relates with Christianity and so many different things, because I think the number one biggest mistake, though, is when anybody is any of these letters here, then there's church people who know nothing about these things. They're not educated on these things. Plus, they know a few Bible verses that seem to indicate that these things are sinful.
Yeah.
And I still don't know how asexuals and intersex people are sinful, but they still find a way to pick on us.
Right. Anybody that's different, or that they don't quite understand, or isn't like them in some way, are somehow sinful in people's eyes sometimes.
Yeah, and a person has to also consider all the verses, not just individual ones. Because, sure, Jesus may have said that, a man will leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife, but he was only talking about straight people, obviously.
Yeah.
But he also knew of the existence of eunuchs and mentioned 3 different types. The ones that were born that way, the ones that were made that way, and the ones that have become that way for the kingdom of God.
Right. So, and that's one thing I promised, is to go over all these questionable scriptures that people keep bringing up, so we can get clarity. And that's why it's going to take a whole series to really cover a lot of this. And I want to cover like the history of like discrimination of different groups of people like this. And so now we're going to talk about Pride Month, which is in June, and some of the objections that people that Christians particularly like to say about Pride Month. Okay, first of all, there's the word pride, which has different meanings. And I've seen people post things about, pride was the sin of Satan that caused him to fall. And now people are celebrating Pride Month because they want to be sinful. All kinds of crazy stuff. Well, it's true, Satan got lifted with pride, but there are different meanings to the word pride. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. Some of the positive definitions are self-esteem, dignity, honor, pleasure, satisfaction, and gratification. And some of the negative ones, now we never did look up that one word, neither one of us knew what it meant, but...
Oh, it was hubris.
Hubris. I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
But we'll have to look that up.
Yeah, we don't know what that word means.
But anyway, so the negative connotation definitions are arrogance, conceit, vanity, hubris, and haughtiness. Now, we know what all those mean except for the word hubris, so... If anybody else out there knows the meaning of that word, you can send us a message maybe and help illuminate us, because these were definitions that we were able to find. And I want to add too, another definition is that's what they call like a lion's herd or whatever.
Yep.
They're called a pride.
Yep.
And so there are many uses for certain words. And so for Christians to pick out the word pride and pick on people because we have this month called Pride Month and pride parades and other pride activities, well, that's of Satan because he got lifted with pride. And yet they'll turn around and say, I'm really proud of my children. I'm really proud of you for doing this or that. Or I'm proud of myself because I accomplished something I've been wanting to do for so long. I'm glad I stuck with it, and I'm proud of it. So, yeah, I mean, we're talking about different meanings of the word pride. And people will look for any excuse to condemn something because they can pick on that word and use it in the wrong way and then assume things and judge people for all kinds of things.
Yeah, see, people use the word pride all the time. They say they're proud of their children or themselves for what they've accomplished. And strangely enough, some people are proud of their identity when they didn't even do anything. It's like, well, some people think, I was born with white skin, therefore I'm better than black people. Some people are like that, like,
So thinking you're better than other people.
Yeah, that's the kind of pride that is commonly referred to as the sin of Satan. And even though I still don't know very much about that, the thing is, this idea that you are more important than others in every way, that, ironically, that is the sin that a lot of heterosexual people are falling into, because they put themselves on a pedestal like, I'm the way I should be, and all the homosexuals are the ones who are wrong. So they get judgmental, and they're actually the one in the sin of pride.
Exactly.
Even though the Pride Month and Pride Parades, which are totally different things, by the way, because whatever Pride Parades have turned into these days, I've heard about them, where, people are doing some things they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that LGBT people and all that stuff are bad in ourselves, or that we have the bad kind of pride for Pride Month.
Yeah. Now, here's what I think the word pride, at least, was meant to be referred to by the LGBTQIA plus community. It's the kind of pride that's the opposite of shame.
Mm-hmm.
The worth of self. Standing up for one's rights, not to be bullied or denied those rights. And so this just means I'm standing up for myself. I'm saying I don't deserve to be treated badly. I'm still a worthwhile person. And I refuse to be shamed because I'm different than you, and I'm different in ways that I can't control. I mean, that would be true of race or anything that we can't control. We are what we are. And so I see that's basically what the pride that the LGBT community is referring to is the opposite of being ashamed of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, so I looked up some information about what's called the Heritage Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Because we found out that they're the ones behind, like, cutting off that suicide hotline for LGBT people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like they just hope people will just kill themselves. And so I found that out, and I looked them up and found out what they were really about. Well, they're a lobbying group. And in some ways, they have some good things they're trying to influence the government about. Because they're against abortion, and they consider themselves, we're the conservative, we're the Christian thing, and we're trying to get our country, the way it should be, and they try to influence the leaders and the laws. And so they try their best, and the way you put it was they kind of bribe them.
Yeah, because basically what they will do is, they will promise to donate to, a presidential campaign or whatever, if that president promises to do certain policies that they want. And so there's so much buying into the system. So the everyday average person, they may get a choice of which candidate to vote for, but all of the candidates are being bought by corporations that sell abortions, that sell guns, the meat and dairy industry, that bribe these people so that they will try to get them to pass laws they want them to that benefits their business.
Yes. Now, like I said, the Heritage Foundation has a few things that seem to be good things, good goals. But the part that's really troubling is one of the things on their agenda. They have a thing called Project 2025 that apparently they started, in 2025. And some people think Trump's a part of it, but he's not. He says, I'm not a part of this. He doesn't want to be responsible for what they're doing. And but here's the part that bothers me about their Project 2025. One of their goals is to remove all protection from the community of LGBTQ and so on, all the protection from discrimination. In other words, there have been laws passed to protect them from being discriminated, with homes and jobs, all kinds of things. Okay? So they want to take away those protections, and they're already starting to do it in some places. Mm-hmm. Wasn't there some place that said it's okay to discriminate against somebody that's, transgender? Because they're really picking on transgender right now.
Yeah, several states have been doing that, where it's like, so you can discriminate against them, and so basically that gives people the legal right, well, we don't have to hire you, or we don't have to let you rent an apartment from us because you're transgender and we can discriminate. That's the whole thing, is that...
So they're trying to make laws that were meant to protect people and say, well, it's not going to apply to you. You're marked with this problem that you're transgender, and so we don't have to respect you. We can just deny you anything.
Yeah.
And they're trying to take away all these protections against discrimination.
Well, and here's the problem. Here's the mistake that the Heritage Foundation and many people are making, is you can't really be pro-life for these babies, but then do things that actively will kill these people later by forcing them into situations where they'll be likely to commit suicide and denying them employment, housing, any protections to protect them from being murdered. So by doing policies that result in these people being murdered, you are going against your own pro-life views. That's the problem. And that's why to be pro-life is to... It doesn't mean you have to agree with everything the LGBTQIA plus community does. What it does mean is not murder us, not try to make our lives harder and try to drive us to suicide. Right. At least respect us as people.
Yeah. And the way people are being marked, like, didn't you talk about how they're trying to make your driver's license and other ID?
Yeah.
To just... you can't get certain ID unless you conform to certain genders.
Yeah, like they had, like in the state of Kansas, they literally just revoked. It said that all the transgender people, the people who had their gender changed to what they feel they are, they're like, oh, your license is no longer valid. So in other words, even though they went through a legal process in their state, and they got their name changed legally, they went through the process of Kansas, they got their gender marker changed, but then the government decided, oh, well, then your license is no longer valid. So that means these people who have their license legal, once this law went into effect, then if they were caught driving with that driver's license that was legal a few days ago, then they're a criminal and they can go to jail.
And they can't drive to work or anything.
And they can't drive to the DMV to get their new corrected license, which has their birth sex instead of their preferred gender.
Yeah. So, this really, I can't help but this remind me of the Holocaust and how the Jews were marked.
Yes.
It's the same thing. It's like you're marked, we can discriminate against you, we're going to take you all and put you in a concentration camp, do whatever we want to you because you're of a group that we don't approve of. And it's like, how could that be happening?
Yeah.
In our government, unless something's really gone backward here.
Yeah, see, they're targeting people who have committed no crime. They haven't actually done anything wrong. And they're trying to force them into a situation where they'll go to jail. And particularly, there's people who it makes a lot more sense for them to have their gender markers of preferred gender, especially trans men who they look like men. Why would you try to force them to have a female, a marker on their license? For what purpose? It doesn't accurately describe them. But also, whether you're male or female has nothing to do with whether you're qualified to drive. They don't even, like on Australia, they don't even have gender markers on people's IDs because it's not relevant.
Right.
But yeah, they're targeting transgender people, sending them to jail when they haven't done anything wrong, and not putting them in with violent criminals, rapists, murderers who are gonna hurt them.
So that's definite discrimination, and this group who's supposed to be Christian is saying, let's just take away all these protections so that these people can be treated bad, that if they're going to kill themselves, they'll just do it and not get any help. I mean, does that really sound like a Christian attitude?
Nope.
Yeah, I think there's a problem. Now, there's another matter about Pride Month that I want to refer to, too. Just like they use the word pride to say, oh, that's bad, you terrible people, you're full of the devil because you want to be in pride like the devil was. Well, there's another thing, too, that people like to pick on. And that's the rainbow that symbolizes the, LGBT people, and also is the, symbol that God gave. It's something that God created, a symbol after the flood to promise not to cover the earth with flood, because every time it hadn't rained until the flood happened. And after that, when it rains, people were going to panic. Oh, no, it's coming again. So he let people know that a lot of times when it rains, that creates a rainbow in the sky. And that reminds people, oh, God promised not to cover the whole world with a flood now. He's not going to wipe everybody out. And so don't be afraid of rain. So anyway, so that's in the Bible, that's the rainbow story. And then the LGBTQ community has adopted the rainbow to signify the various colors of the rainbow and the diversity of things. So here's another thing we hear a lot, and people will post this complaint about people using the rainbow. And so the question is, did the LGBTQ community steal the rainbow from God? That's what they'll post, that they stole the rainbow from God. Okay, now think about that. They had the power to steal something that God created.
Yeah.
And that's what it means to have a rainbow symbolize them and their cause of accepting all varieties of people on the spectrum of various things that they talk about, and why the rainbow flag is, brought up a lot. And so, first of all, the rainbow's not a bad thing anyway, because it's a lot of pretty colors, and people usually enjoy seeing a rainbow in the sky. But how in the world could anybody actually steal the rainbow from God? But people actually claim that.
Yeah.
And accuse that community from stealing the rainbow from God. Now, I'd like you to comment on what in the world you think that even means.
Well, see, I wasn't at the committee meeting when the gays decided to steal the rainbow from God, so I'm not responsible for that. But
I don't know. That must have taken a lot of courage.
yeah.
And how'd they get away with it? I mean, did God just go to sleep while they stole the rainbow from him? Because first of all, the Bible says God doesn't sleep or slumber. So what did he do? I mean, you're taking my rainbow away that I put in the sky. Are they more powerful than God that they could go and steal that rainbow to represent them?
Look, if we had the power to steal a rainbow, we would be God.
Right. Yeah, who would have ever thought? You mean God could be gay? Ooh!
Now that being said, you know how sometimes you see a rainbow in the sky and then it's gone later? Maybe some of them did steal some of the rainbows. I don't know.
But I mean, really now, then that can lead you to all kinds of things. And then the blasphemy of saying, well, maybe God's gay. I don't think God even has a sexual orientation. But regardless, I just want you to see how ludicrous this really is, because you're going to hear things like that about the pride thing and about the rainbow and anything they can find to pick on to make it look like the LGBT community is really, really bad. And and Chastity's had former friends tell her that they can't have anything to do with her now because of her sinful lifestyle.
Yeah.
Well, what kind of sin do they think she's done? She doesn't do anything except work and try to get enough sleep.
Yep, I work.
She never does anything that would be a traditionally considered sin, and yet just because she's different now, they're rejecting her and say, well, it's your sinful lifestyle. They assume she's sinful because she's different than them, and they don't understand it.
Yep, and okay, here's the thing. The only difference between me now and when I was 20s or in my teenage years is that now I've just become open and honest about how I feel, who I am,
Right.
No, but my behavior hasn't really changed very much.
No, you're still as funny as you ever were. You're still as honest and nice and good to people and a loving person. And I just can't figure it out.
Yep.
Why anybody would tell her she has a sinful lifestyle. So whenever things go wrong in her life, I say, we joke about it. I go, it must be your sinful lifestyle. But she... she's not doing anything that should be considered a sin. She didn't even have time, and she didn't have energy because she's always sleep deprived from working at night and all that she has to do.
Yeah.
She's always exhausted, has a hard time getting enough sleep during the day, and then she doesn't have time to do anything else. She doesn't have time to sin.
Yeah, and contrary to popular belief, the transgender people are not the ones shooting all the children in schools.
Exactly. Now, okay, it happened once where one of the people that shot somebody in a school happened to be transgender. From then on, everybody assumed that every school shooter was a transgender.
Yep.
And then somebody else happened to be trans that shot some of the, what were they, the government, I think it was the ICE people that, the immigration officers,
Mm-hmm.
and they happen to be trans. Other than that, you hear every day about another shooting. Some of them are in schools, and some of them are, at other places. And you hear all kinds of things, but you never hear anything about anybody being transgender. And yet, right after that all happened, with that one person who shot some people in a school,
Mm-hmm.
who killed some kids in the school, right on the news. There were people saying, telling the public, talking about the transgender people, they're going into the schools and they're killing your children. And then another person in their regular news report said these trans shooters, these mentally ill savages. Well, there's two things wrong with that. First of all, trans shooters are in the minority, and what does being trans have to do with the fact they're out shooting? Okay, but the second thing is that makes it look like being mentally ill makes you a savage, so that throws more of a stigma on mentally ill people, and many of them, they're completely innocent, but they just need treatment just like any other kind of an illness.
Yeah, being mentally ill isn't a crime. It's more often a result of how you've been treated anyway.
It's not, doesn't mean you're a savage. So see, that's a problem, and the attitude of trans shooters, when very rarely does one of the shooters turn out to be trans.
Yeah,
but everybody's got their bias already. Ooh, trans, bad. They're killing your children. So take it personally.
Yeah. Well, and there's another aspect that needs to be talked about. First of all, many states have laws where if you have a mental illness, you're not allowed to buy a gun. Plus, you need an ID, and they won't let us have IDs. So how are they getting guns?
I don't want a gun anyway, and sometimes I can see why mentally ill people shouldn't have a gun. Because some of them are depressed and might kill themselves. And then other people might, have other problems that might lead them to do things like that. But being trans doesn't have anything to do with whether you're mentally ill or not. But as we go through more of the history of some of these attitudes, you'll see how for a long time people believed that gay people were just plain mentally ill. And it was categorized that way, and they were trying to put them in places to get them help. They tried all kinds of crazy things. And finally, it was proven that it's not a mental illness, but people still hold on to that idea sometimes. Things are hard to get rid of these biases. So that one of the things we're going to do during this series is we're going to go more over the history of these attitudes. And more over some of the Bible passages, because I've only barely covered a couple of them, and there's many more that are used against people and being preached about in churches, and over again say, see, this is bad. Look what it says right here in God's Word, and try to use proof text to prove this and prove that. So we're going to cover a lot of ground, and this was something that God put on my heart, because every week I pray, well, what do you want us to do next? And like Chastity said, she was already thinking about it, but then that's what God showed me. We're supposed to do a whole series on it, and we're supposed to get started now in preparation for Pride Month, which is in June. Now, we may have to skip a couple of our May episodes because of some things that have come up. That those days that we usually do it, we'll be busy with things. But unless we can fit in some other time somewhere, there may be some that we miss, but then we'll pick up again as soon as we're able to finish out May and probably go through this all the way through June and during Pride Month or even beyond. We don't know how long this is going to go, but that's why this is going to be a series to try to cover more ground than we've been able to do, because God's led us to talk about a lot of other things, but it must be time for us to deal more with these kind of issues. And so I just also wanted to ask people, where do you think all this hate comes from that people have toward the LGBT people?
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that a lot of it is the fear of things we don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we get the idea homophobia, transphobia. When we don't understand it, there tends to be a chance to get fearful of it. Like, we just get afraid of things we don't understand.
Yeah. See, once they come to understand, they're not as afraid.
Right. And see, the only reason I was afraid, I was just afraid something was wrong with my kid. Because I'd always been told, well, if they think that there's something wrong with them, I was just worried. But once I understood, I'm not worried about it now. And I like to be an ally and, give everybody support in this area where they're being rejected. Anyway, and then I thought, too, some people make fun of LGBT people.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to ask myself, well, why would they make fun of it? Well, that right there, I believe, is a defense against that fear. I'm scared of this, so let's make fun of it and pretend it's not anything I have to worry about. Let's make fun of it. We'll see somebody that's different, and well, what does that mean? I don't know, but let's laugh about it and act like they're freaky, and they might be freaky, but I bet you're freaky too, no matter what kind of sexual orientation.
Well,
you have.
another thing that's very common is that often the people who are making fun of the gay and the transgender people, they often really are that way themselves, and they're trying to cover up the way that their way, because they see other people bullying people, so they join in with the bullying to throw the light off of themselves.
That's a good point.
Because if they show any sympathy, or if they don't bully them, then they think, oh, they're in agreement with them being the way they are, so then they'll get bullied. So they're more afraid of the straight people who are bullying the other gay people.
Well, haven't you seen that in schools when kids are growing up? If one person gets bullied or teased, even someone who was their friend will back away because they don't want to be associated with them, because they think, oh, now I'll get bullied too.
Exactly.
So let's pretend I don't really care about this person. That's a good point right there.
Yep.
And also, when you were saying that, I thought about many, many times there have been preachers, well-known preachers, who really, really preach strong against homosexuality.
Yep.
And come to find that secretly they were involved in it. It's almost like they were preaching it themselves, and it was their defense to really be harsh about it. Maybe they were hoping they could convince themselves to change, but they couldn't. So they did this secretly, and some of them lost their ministry eventually, because they were being hypocritical by, preaching against it and then living a double life. So you're right. Sometimes they're that way and they don't want to admit it or even look like it, so they go the other way and really condemn the very thing that they've been involved in.
Yeah, and this is sort of interesting too, because there have been issues in regards to the pornography industry. Because, like, the largest company of pornography is called Pornhub. And they know which users, which accounts, because, are people, so they can identify them. So what they've known is people who are doing laws against the gays are actually watching gay porn themselves on Pornhub. And they're trying to throw the light off themselves. And so then Pornhub has actually threatened to reveal who these people are in Congress and stuff like that. They're doing these things like to point out their hypocrisy.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that pornography is good or anything like that. But what I am saying is that there's a conflict and there's hypocrisy going on. And there's been blackmailing of that sort of nature going on that I've read about occasionally.
Yeah, so we're going to cover more about the history of these attitudes, and there's a lot to talk about, and that's why we're going to have to just do a whole series, and why this is only part one of that series. So, do you have any more to say about that before we conclude?
Let's see. I don't think so. But I feel like we've given a pretty good introduction to these topics. You know, because each individual issue needs to be discussed separately.
Right. Yeah.
And particularly individual issues of how things should be handled, like transgender people in sports, for example. Right. You know, which is an important topic to many people. Although I I personally am not into sports, so I've never played much.
But that's an area that needs to be addressed. Yeah. We've already talked some about the bathroom issue, but we may talk more about that. There's a lot of things that we had promised to cover in these podcasts, and we did a little bit of it, but then God let us talk about certain other things. And I've noticed how God just kind of makes it all fit together at the right time for people. And so we know He knows what He's doing. And so we're going to start this and try to cover more ground with it. And I think part of the reason He's having us do this is because we have the Pride Month coming up. And people are going to have all kinds of attitudes and make all kinds of comments. And people need to know really what's going on, what parts they agree with about Pride Month, which parts are not bad at all, and that we need to support people in it. So it is an important thing to deal with.
Yeah, and you know, another thing that I should say, though, is that this particularly raises issues for people like it did for me, because years ago, although I didn't fully understand it all, I knew that the issue of LGBT people and churches was a conflict. And I remember very distinctly that people were talking about it at churches I was in. And
that was before you knew that you were transgender.
And I didn't even know really about myself what I was back then.
And you didn't even know what they were talking about some of the time.
Right, but the thing is, I got enough information from them to realize to where I was hoping that maybe another religion was true instead of Christianity, because I thought, well, if Christianity is true, then I'm going to hell.
Right.
I didn't know what I was going to hell for. I still don't know what sinful lifestyle you know.
Yeah, see, so we need to investigate why people get so hateful and why they drive people away from Christianity.
Yeah.
Because of all this nonsense that goes on, and it all has to be questioned. And just like I've been saying the whole time, there's things that need to be questioned in the Bible and so forth, and God wants us to question things and get wisdom from Him. And so it's very important that we cover some of this ground.
Yeah.
And so the main thing that I have to say about this first episode is it's to be continued.
Yeah.
So that's what we'll say. To be continued. Just like a movie. If it just started, there's lots more to come. And so we'll continue this the next time we do a podcast.
All right. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for future episodes.